I'd like to talk now about what I observed in the small group portion in the math stations that you saw me observing, and my feedback and my reflection will be based on the notes that you saw me taking in the video, and also this is a small or I want to say abridged, but it's not abridged. It's really just a condensed version of the PDOS form that our administrators use on us, and I've used these with student teachers before, or to go and observe other student teachers. But it has every component that every large heading and all of the indicators that you might observe. Everything from classroom environment to the components of your math instruction, your discipline, best practice, ELL, and SPED documentation, all of those things. So I thought if I was going into a classroom for 20 minutes to observe, I would want feedback if that were me, and there's no, you can only benefit from feedback if you are being a reflective teacher. And so the next part would be to, I guess, discuss the first step of the Gibbs reflective cycle, which would be just kind of reporting on what I saw. So in the 20 minutes that I was observing, I saw a few rotations of math stations. And immediately I saw that the lesson was aligned to fifth grade curriculum. This was a little bit later in the year. It was post-STAR, and this is back in May 2014, and the students were focusing on the specific TEK that involves four-digit divisors with a four-digit dividend with a two-digit divisor without decimals. So that would be the first level of that TEK before introducing decimals. So I was really impressed with that, and I was really happy to see the vertical alignment. That was really what I was looking for. And to see that Mr. Mendoza was directly teaching step up to fifth grade, which is what we really sometimes miss at the end of the year, because we're trying to hit star and get scores to go up, and then STAR's over, school's I'm done teaching, or I want to do this project or this project. And to be as late in the year as it was in this classroom, it just really reaffirmed what good reflective and effective teaching looks like. Because even if it is in May, you're still required to be pulling your small groups, and you're still required to be, teaching your mini lesson and then going into stations and then fulfilling all the components of our 90-minute instructional plan. So as I saw the rotations, you heard Mr. Mendoza talking to his students, and you heard the students having a conversation, and then you heard the noise in the background, and myself looking at the small group table and also monitoring everything else that was going on. I took a lot of notes, and if you saw when I changed pen color and I circled something, it was a question, and I really wanted to focus on evaluating the quality of the question. That's one of our campus goals this year, other than critical thinking is one of them, and we have initiatives like using thinking maps and interactive notebooks, and those are things that our campus is really strong with. We have a lot of younger teachers, newer teachers, and one of the components of our campus improvement plan is quality questioning. Quality questioning is something that we've been trained on and had professional development with, and we've also had follow-up this year. So to see a teacher using all of this questioning, and not only that, but scaffolding his questions as much as you did here, is definitely on target teaching and instruction. So with that in mind, I'd like to now kind of talk about my feelings towards what I saw. As far as differentiation, I think I'll start with that. I did not observe the differentiation that I would with certain groups at a more, or at an earlier time of the year, when it's not Mr. Mendoza teaching a new concept that all of his kids, he wants all of his kids to be exposed for at the end of the year, moving on to 5th grade next year. Earlier in the year, I may have seen something that was more tiered based on his leveled groups. Now, I did hear difference in the conversation that he had with his groups and the ways that he questioned his seemingly lower groups, the way that he would follow up a question that wasn't answered with a different question that would lead the child to success after they had to kind of think about his first question. So that's where I did see some differentiation. I did not see differentiation in the content or the question that was used. It was the same question for each group. And so I think that with true differentiation, you'd be considering the vocabulary and the level of depth or specificity. So in a lower level group, if we're trying to really improve and prepare students in 4th grade for good 5th grade division skills, I might see a 2-digit divisor, but I might see only a 3-digit dividend. Or I may, especially for the group in the back where there was and this was not on the video, but in the back, the one special ed student with the pulled math group that the paraprofessional was giving inclusion support and parallel co-teaching, I would probably see a 1-digit divisor with a 3-digit dividend. And so I know that, and these are things that I get to follow up with Mr. Mendoza after the observation, and then we talk. And so it really did, by sharing my feedback with him, he was then able to explain, so when I prepare for my lesson plans, I also send them to the paraprofessional, and I actually do go over with her the things that I want her to teach. So I really did get to see, and I know this as a teacher too, when an administrator comes in and observes you for that snapshot of your day, a lot of times you feel like you don't get to kind of just justify what you're doing, or I guess explain the learning objective behind it. Maybe they might not see where you started from or where you're going or what you've already talked about with your kids. So I think that was really important for me to do, and I knew that my administrators have always done that with me if they weren't clear on something or they wanted to just see where that snapshot was in the flow of the 90-minute lesson. So I did sit down with Mr. Mendoza afterwards, and I showed him what I saw and shared my observations and the awesome problem solving that was going on, and then just some of my observations. And he was able to give me that clarity, so then I saw the whole picture a little clearer, even though I wasn't in there for the entire time. So I think that with everything that was going on, I felt really good about the math instruction that's happening. Mr. Mendoza has taken it upon himself to really target problem solving this year. And although it is a campus initiative, I know that a lot of times we think that the content or the level of rigor that's involved is going to be too much for our kids. And I like to see how these kids were kind of just, it was almost kind of like taking that risk and saying, okay, well, we're going to be doing this division, and I don't want you to be scared because I am here. So I thought that was really cool. As far as the evaluation, which would be the third component of the cycle, I do think that Mr. Mendoza is definitely a proficient teacher. He has a very organized classroom where he posts his expectations and his schedules. You heard the slide on in the background, which would ring, and his students got up flawlessly and just moved to the next part. And that routine and procedure, I know he took a lot of time to make sure that his students were really comfortable with that, because when I come in, they didn't even pay any attention to me. They were very comfortable with having other people in the room, and they just did what they needed to do. I think that because his students had that procedure, those expectations, he was able to really get his kids to actively engage with each other and in the discussion that's going on at the table. You heard talking the entire time, but at no point did I hear off-target, off-topic conversation, which is really hard. At some points I did hear students speaking Spanish, and sometimes Mr. Mendoza has told me before that sometimes he does have to remind his kids, remember this week is an English week, or this week is a Spanish week. So he this week was an English week, so he did talk to those students to remind them afterwards that, you know, we're trying to really help their goals with their English proficiency. So make sure on Spanish weeks we speak in Spanish, on English weeks we speak in English. But if you're with a peer and you're sitting on the floor, you should really try to challenge yourself to speak in English and use that academic vocabulary. That brings me to another part of the evaluation that I really did appreciate, which was the level of complete sentences in the conversation that I heard in the small group. When Mr. Mendoza would ask a question, his students would respond in mostly complete sentences. And he knew how to scaffold each question for a child so they would have a complete response, which was really neat. I definitely did hear some academic vocabulary, but it was more coming from the teacher instead of the student. So I would definitely recommend him to possibly record himself, or maybe record just the audio of when he does small group, when he's using small group to practice a new topic, that he listened to the balance between how much he talks and how much his students talk, and see if it's equal or if it's not. Now, I did hear so many questions, which is great. A lot of scaffolded questions, like I mentioned before, and a lot of evaluative questions, or asking his kids to evaluate this, and what does this mean? But what does it mean when I say this? Or how do we know? How do we know? Why? Why is that going on? You know, automatically asking those questions, your kids are thinking on a higher critical level. But I would want to see more wait time. I think wait time is really important, and I would encourage him to give his students that wait time, and to see where or how quickly or how slowly or how appropriately he thinks he is asking those questions and waiting, because that's another campus directive that we have is for appropriate wait time. I think the kids were very excited about the math that they were learning, and when kids are excited, they're automatically engaged. So that's the last part of the evaluation that I wanted to share, was that the students were absolutely engaged in what they were doing, and all of the station activities were star leveled, you know, multi-step problem solving, or they were practicing a skill, or they were on the computers with their fluency practice. So that engagement was really seen in every component of the math stations, which was really impressive. The use of technology was a lower level. It was really, it wasn't necessarily student high-level activity of collaborating. It was more of low-level usage of researching, but they were practicing their math fluency, like reflexmath.com is the website, and they practice their math facts, which is something that's huge, that we definitely need and want. So I would definitely ask him about, well, and having actually talked to him, I did end up asking him about the other ways that he integrates technology on a higher level, and the ways that, if, you know, he allows his students to collaborate or share their projects on Google Docs, and he told me that he not only shares them, but they are allowed to comment and evaluate students' work, which again I didn't observe, but that was just another thing that he followed up with me on. But as far as what I did observe was that lower level, just that practice with the reflex math game. The last part that I did see, or I guess the last consideration that I would have as looking through the eyes of an administrator now that I've talked about differentiation and let me go back to that practicum explanation here to make sure I've hit the so we've the ethnic appreciation, multicultural awareness, gender sensitivity. I didn't see those specific components, but I knew that in a lot of ways, like I know that the child in the back at the table, in no way, shape, or form, the special education child, in no way, shape, or form, had any issues with what they were doing, and neither did the students at the table. There were no walls that didn't connect the kids, and the activities they're built on the complexity that matches what the child is ready for. So there is a lot of just a lot of scaffolding that can happen when a child is able to choose their own level of complexity when they do play the games and when they do problem solve. They're doing that in a way that makes sense to them. But the table in the back with the parallel co-teaching with the paraprofessional, that's where I did see a little bit more of the just like that multicultural awareness or the learning differences when this child might get a multiplication chart, which I could kind of see some of those accommodations. No one really, the kids had a sense of culture where that wasn't a big deal to them. No one, looked a different way at that, and the child was very comfortable in using that tool or going into their box and using the accommodations that were in there. As far as learning differences, again, I think that just the largest thing that I was able to see was that to offer the feedback on with the to recap, more higher use of technology, making sure that he's talking less than his kids are, making sure that there's wait time. The last one would be providing feedback. I don't think there was a lot of time for Mr. Mendoza to give one-on-one feedback, where I might see that more in a small group when it's focusing on something that's in 4th grade math. I would expect to see him really focusing with this one child, and then while these kids are problem solving, he's talking one-on-one with this child and able to almost sieve out the kids one by one as they do get it, they can leave, and then you kind of filter your small group down to the child in that group that has the most need at that day. So I didn't see that a lot with his groups, but I did see that with one of his groups that was more confident in the problem solving. It was obviously his higher group. They had more conversation than he did, and they were definitely quieter because I think they were more, they definitely understood a little bit better than some of his other groups. So that is really important to kind of, think about. Are you, in the things that you're doing and the way that you're saying things, are you really giving that child what they need? Are you really doing what's best for that child? So I think that the action that would be taken next would be to write down the strengths that I saw, which is what I've used my PDAS form for. The strengths that I saw, and then my list of recommendations. And on that list of recommendations would definitely be to record yourself teaching or videotape yourself. Would definitely be to look at the questions that you pre-plan, if you pre-plan your questions, or offer or advise Mr. Mendoza to maybe have his questions rewritten so he knows that he's hitting some really targeted quality questions, and then he can scaffold as needed. Definitely on that list would be to look at some ways that he can add student-centered technology to his stations. But overall, it was a really successful observation, and I was really happy to see what I did. I just forgot that the last thing that I would put on there would be to offer, ask him and offer some ways to give student feedback. So that way the kids know how they're doing and how their teacher thinks that they're doing, and, how the teacher feels that they're evaluating, problem solving this point. So those are the reflections I have. And again, it was a successful observation, and I really enjoyed it. So thank you very much.